Hi, this is Dr. Randy Bach. Today's January 4th, 2023, and I'm here with a coronavirus conversation in a somber mode. The United States and probably much of the world is gripped by the sad tragedy of a young man stricken, cut down, and possibly with his life at an end. We don't know that. He's in critical condition. His name is Demar Hamlin. People probably know there was a crucial, playoff consequence game between the Buffalo Bills and the Cincinnati Bengals Monday night, and that game was stopped temporarily, and then in full, postponed indefinitely because of the tragic injury to this young gentleman. So it's hard to delve into this topic, but there are a lot of questions about it. I'm sure people have gotten very internet savvy very quickly. Just as people became epidemiologists on the fly during COVID-19, COVID-20, COVID-21, 22, 22. People are, there's, a lot of people have become cardiology experts right away. I'm not. I'm a general practice physician. I'm an MD. And I'd like to give you my take on the matter. I am in basic agreement with the diagnosis that is out there. It's a Latin term, Commotio Cordis, which is the same word basically as we derive commotion, and cordis, misericordia, has to do with the heart, cardiac, same basic word. So commotio means like a commotion, disruption. So it's a disruption to the heart. Probably people are familiar with this kind of like ability that some people might have to give a cardiac thump when people have had their heart stopped. This is kind of the basic same thing, but in the opposite direction. So the heart is going, and theoretically you can put a stop to it with this kind of fist of death. I think that's what the Chinese martial arts have called it historically. So it's a well-known phenomenon over the years, but it occurs rarely. Again, there's a specific Chinese martial art move. I think they literally do call it in Chinese the fist of death. That can, at the right timing, give a sudden spasm to the heart and change its kind of electrical pattern temporarily, and give it into ventricular fibrillation, I believe, or VTAC, ventricular tachycardia, which is not really conducive to staying upright. I'm not sure exactly what the diagnosis was with Mr. Hamlin. I believe that everyone seems to acknowledge he went into cardiac arrest. What the underlying rhythm was, if any, we don't necessarily know. I know he had a defibrillator. Fortunately, there were defibrillators quickly at hand. I'm not sure within how many minutes. I know there was CPR done almost immediately. Literally our prayers are with him and hope for his speedy recovery. He's a brave man in general. He wasn't a top draft pick. He wasn't, I think he was a sixth round pick a couple of years ago, and he made it into the starting lineup through injuries to others. Football, people, see as a violent sport, and essentially it is. It is a controlled violence. There's an excellent book I recommend reading by Daniel J. Flynn, probably about 15 years ago, called The War on Football. And I think it's very instructive. He points out that, there always have been measures taken to bring down the number of concussions. They're about 100 years old. I think even during the reign of Teddy Roosevelt, there were people clamoring to have football cut down the number of head injuries. Oddly enough, the more padding that we have, that tends to bring higher speed. We have players that are stronger, more fit, bigger, and running at better speeds and all that kind of stuff. It's a little bit like skateboarding, snowboarding, skiing, and so forth. We put on, or motocross or any of these sports, we put on protection, and generally speaking, the excitement is if you go right to the limits of what that protection provides. So, if you look around, you see guys and gals, more guys, trying very adventurous sports like parkour, where they're flipping off, bridges and, walls and whatnot, and climbing up, jumping from, precarious spot to precarious spot. So I think it's somewhere in our genome, and certainly within our excitement range, to push the limit on what we can do, and that breeds excitement, and it breeds attention, and attention can be a measure of success. Men have, always been, aiming for some kind of way of differentiating themselves. This probably goes back deeply into our Darwinian past as a way of showing themselves the strongest possible mate for the female, and the female, generally speaking, is attracted to that. It's not just the athleticism, but with the attention comes finance, money, and so somebody from, say, Mr. Hamlin's presumably modest upbringing and neighborhood and so forth. I believe he came from Pittsburgh, went to Catholic high school there. Somebody from his situation, I think he went to Pitt after, a hometown kid, can be set for life if he gets his contract or big contract. Even just being a scrub, sixth round draft pick is worth probably $800,000 a year. I'm not sure the number, but usually hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for that level of player. And that's not chicken feed. So there is an excitement. I'm a football fan. I acknowledge that it's dangerous. I never played very much a tackle football, tiny bit, but I take some of the advice I give here from Jerry Callahan. I listened to his podcast, and he played football, and his son played football. And there's certainly a lot of tension and worry if your son is going to go out there and be injured. My older son played tackle football, but we do it because it's exciting. We watch it because it's potentially violent. As a contrary and a corollary to the concept of whether football should exist and so forth, is that a lot of the guys who are playing wouldn't necessarily be, I don't know. Some of them could be, clearly, but a lot of them wouldn't be your doctors and lawyers and accountants and insurance salesmen and so forth. And from some of the rough and tumble neighborhoods historically that football has grown its players from, this is a way of organizing violence, of having people have an outlet, having young boys who have a lot of energy, a lot of strength, have a way of having that channeled and mobilized towards something that is cohesive, that brings friendships, that brings the kind of outpouring of emotion that we saw on the field from amongst not just his teammates but the opposing players. I mean, there's probably no Renaissance painting tableau of misery than you could have seen amongst the players' faces on Monday night, and not just them, but the people in the stands and everybody. Frankly, it moves me now even to think on it. They hung out with this gentleman. Hopefully, they'll be hanging out with him again, but one can't be sure. The actual prognosis or the likelihood of getting well from this has improved over time, but it's an individual case. I mean, really, I think it has much to do with how soon a defibrillator and or CPR can be applied. So historically, the mortality rate from Commotio Cordis is very low. It's like in the 5 to 10, 15% range. But those numbers are improving, and I was reading that as many as 60% of cases currently can kind of get back on their feet and so forth. Whether he returns to football again, should he live, is another question. Whether he should is another question. And anyway, so with that as introduction, I just want to, I've been thinking about this, and I spent a few hours kind of sifting through some of the words and thoughts out there. I spent a little bit of time looking up Commotio Cordis. I went to medical school. I was awake most of it. I don't recall hearing that name per se, but it's there, and you can Google it. It's not just a recent term. It's been known for quite some time. There aren't that many cases of it in general, and such as they are, tend to be amongst the young. So I'm going to pop up some slides, and we'll see if this makes any sense to the situation. So I want to start here with Demar Hamlin's own Twitter feed. These go back various number of years, and let I think there's a tendency to kind of what's the word I'm looking for, to kind of emotionally separate a tragic individual from his own life, and we tend to get our own conceptions of what would be the best thing, what he should have done. But his own desires, such as they are, and he's voiced them. This is his own Twitter feed. When you can see the numbers where they're, of likes and whatnot are in the dozens, or a few hundred, and probably a lot of those are recent since this injury on Monday. So the top one is "I just want to play football." That's 2019. College football and chill, 2015. I miss playing football. Maybe he was injured at that time in 2017. He's getting a number as a pro. 31 was my first football number ever. I guess he kind of graduated to the kind of sexier single-digit number. I think he was number 3, which tends to be reserved for some of the better players. So I think they have a lot of respect for him in Buffalo. I have to say I have not followed his career very much, except through the prism recently of watching the Patriots. And I'm going to put out some things that are not meant to deride or slam Mr. Hamlin, but just put him in the context of a football player. So let's see. What am I doing wrong here? I don't know what's going on here. So I think that was the last slide. Let me just put the slideshow back up. So I just want to play football. That is his message. He has praying hands there. That's his prayer. That would be my fervent prayer for him, that he gets up and plays football again. Not immediately, maybe in a year or two. We'll see about that. I'm not sure he'll ever be able to play at the same level if he had a genuine cardiac arrest, depending on his recovery abilities. Again, it's unclear whether he will actually survive this. So, a couple of weeks ago, I think this was December 1st, he was ejected for a brutal hit on Jacoby Myers. So he did. I actually don't think he had intention to do a head-on-head, helmet-on-helmet. But, these things are very, very quick. And so Myers was in the end zone, and the game was actually it was all done. It was 24-7, I think was the score. Buffalo was winning, and Mac Jones of the Patriots threw to Jacoby Myers in the end zone. And it didn't really matter one way or the other whether the touchdown was scored, because I think there was only a couple of minutes left in the game. But such as it is, players do what they need to do. If he doesn't put the right hit on, he may lose his standing. He's only, like I said, a 6th-round draft pick, and he might not last on the team if he doesn't do the right thing. So he made the tackle, and Myers kind of went down. So it wound up being really shoulder on helmet. And I don't know if Myers had a concussion. I believe he did. I believe he was out for a week or so afterwards, maybe 2 weeks. And Hamlin was ejected from the game. I'm not trying to make this any kind of retribution, but I'm just putting in the context that football players do football things. And, he's, I'd like to kind of, give a sense of who he is. Here's kind of a football profile of him. 6th-round safety. Again, there's 7 rounds in the draft. There's some people are undrafted, but most of the players are in the upper rounds, and most of the stars and so forth. So he's done admirably, and he's got some good data here. And I'm not going to go into it. You can pause if you want to look at it. But apparently he's doing pretty well, and so that's a wonderful thing. Here's a picture of him with a coach from University of Pittsburgh, and how proud they are that he's making his first career start in September. So kind of to get to the actual injury, if you watch the game, it doesn't really look extraordinary from the range of injuries and tackles and moves that football players go through on a regular basis. This is kind of like they say, a 1 in a million kind of thing. In a way it is. I just wanted to go into the numbers a little bit. There are, I think, about 300 individual NFL games per year. Not so much counting the preseason, but you can, but about 300. And there's 22 players on the field at any given moment. There's about 133 plays in the game, and there's a lot of hitting. I would assume that everybody has at least one hit, one on the other in a football game. And over the course of a season, this totals to about 1 million individual, hits that are tallied over the course of the season. The NFL has been around, I think, since the 1930s or so. So that's about 90 years or so. But let's just count last 50 or whatever as the modern NFL, and we're talking about 50 million hits and so forth. There's never been a single case of this type of injury or this particular cause of cardiac arrest on the football field. I think in 1972 there was a death from cardiac arrest, but I don't think it involved the hit in this form, and was not Commotio Cordis. So let me just add this back. So here's basically the nature of what the problem is. There's a small dense object. It hits the heart at exactly the right time. We can see here that there's a very small vulnerable window. It's like a 30th of a second during the regular heartbeat. But not just the regular timing, because people would be hit all the time. I mean, it has to be not just the right timing, but the right spot. And moreover, there has to be the right kind of anatomy for this. So this is just a little bit talking about martial arts. I was mentioning before, this has happened in other sports, but mostly in other sports. It's very rare in football. Most of the time it's happening from a hard, dense projectile, a baseball, a hockey puck, a lacrosse ball. And you can see here, these are the general causes from balls themselves. And baseball, a pitcher pitches it really hard, the player hits it back really hard. So you have, basically like, 80 to 120 mile an hour baseballs, depending which direction they're going. And if they hit you right in the right spot, this can happen. This is nonetheless is a very rare problem. I think there's only about 30 such deaths per year in the United States out of 300 million people. So it's less than, 1 in a million kind of thing per year. It's probably 1 in 10 million per year. But it's across the board. And football doesn't really kind of factor into this too much. The breakdown of these occurrences, it does include the occasional football. Here's the head, football helmet, and so forth. There were 2 cases out of 128 such cases that was measured in this study. So again, all of it was baseball, and then if you include softball, so baseball / softball are pretty much the only major causes of this. And it's not just sports. So gang rituals, parent-to-child discipline, sledding, snowball, playground swing. There's pretty much as much coming from football as hiccup remedies by a friend or falling on the monkey bars. So it's not like football has to be eliminated to get rid of this problem. You'd have to pretty much eliminate, parenting, a certain amount of parent disciplining, a lot of playful fighting, a lot of unplayful fighting, martial arts, etc. So I think this, again, it's a very, very rare thing. It's hard to find the underlying associated comorbidities because it's so rare. But I will say this, though, that it's almost always in the young. So what is up with that? If you look at the number of cases, and these are non-survivors, so there's a lot of death here. And this is back in 2002. I think we've gotten better in the last number of years, having more electronic defibrillators on hand. So these numbers should improve. I think they've improved by as much as 60%. But you're looking at young kids, 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 9, 10 to 12. It's very rare above age 25. And certainly there's a lot of athletic activity and martial arts and so forth happening above this age. Well, what is up with that? I mean, what is the difference? And it does happen in football, as you can see here. But again, mostly baseball, softball, hockey amongst the sports, karate, lacrosse, and so forth. So this is just kind of going over the same stuff here. Everyone mentions as a sidelight the hockey player, I think it was Chris Pronger, was struck by a slap shot during the Stanley Cup playoffs. He got down and he recovered, but apparently, he didn't necessarily have full cardiac stoppage, and he may not have had the direct hit that others have had with the mortality. Umpires wear those big chest protectors because they have had such issues. Those tend to work, but nothing is perfect per se. Again, this goes over. These are from similar reviews of the problem that it can happen in a variety of circumstances that are part of daily living and unrelated to athletic activities. So this is a very interesting slide. This is one I want to focus on a little bit here, that children appear to be at the highest risk. It's a combination of a thinner chest wall and an increased likelihood of being baseball and whatnot. So if you want to get rid of something, I guess you get rid of Little League baseball or make kids wear Kevlar chest protectors or something like that. But very few cases, because the anatomy changes as you get older. So this kind of brings up a side issue of the kind of the way we're allowed to talk about the Hamlin case. There's been kind of as there always is, there's a little bit of a mud fight on Twitter and social media and whatnot, and nobody's really allowed to talk about the elephant in the room. I'm going to actually bring up that as the title of one of the Substack articles I'm going to talk about. But the elephant in the room is there some other cause? I think it really, bears repeating that Commotio Cordis does not typically happen in adults, and it does not happen ever in the NFL to date till now. And again, we're talking about 1 million hits per year. We'll say in the registry of 50 to 100 million hits in the NFL, and that's not even including college sports, which there are many more college games, and so now we're probably talking in the range literally of billions of hits, and these are adult men flying themselves at each other and hitting themselves in all different places in order to make the tackle. They're not considering anatomy. They don't go over the. I'm sure none of them had ever heard of Commotio Cordis. As a physician, I had never really heard of it either. And so in the realm of billions of such hits, this has never happened before. What is different now? I don't think there was anything extraordinary about T. Higgins hitting Demar Hamlin in that play. I mean, I've seen my fair share of football games, and there was nothing that really, that I saw when the play happened. And frankly, the camera moved away, and only later they saw him on the ground. They came back and showed that he'd gotten up and fallen down. So there was nothing really on the play that you could see, wow, that was a terrible hit. Sometimes they'll be, oh, you can hear the helmets crash. There was none of that. There was nothing really that much extraordinary from, the kind of pile driving plays that people do, the running backs going at each other and pushing each other, all that kind of stuff, and a lot of, fists and strong arms and so forth. Again, that's probably the excitement of the game. That's why the NFL is, I think, the most lucrative sports league in the history of mankind. And that's why people come to it, because there is kind of the, the equivalent of war without going to war. And people get the excitement of leaving all that stuff aside. I think people have some interest in this. But through probably literally billions of hits over the decades in all college and high school, all these sports with very big individuals going at each other, there's never been not one single episode. Yet the kind of the slinging mud fight on Twitter and elsewhere is that you can't really mention this elephant in the room. And that's what I'm kind of going to right now. I'm going to talk about the elephant in the room. Let's see if I can maybe finish off some of these slides while I'm at it. And so I think this is a very interesting point, that it does not really happen in adults. And some of this, again, some of the history, I guess the Dim is an ancient Chinese martial art, which I guess was called the touch of death. I'm not sure I said the right name. And these are from some scholarly articles. And here's some other cases. Again, the mean age is 15 years old, with few cases reported in individuals older than 20. This may be due to the fact that protection of the heart by subcutaneous fat, muscle bulk, and fully ossified ribs all become more common in adulthood. So you may or may not know this, but the rib cage is bony, but part of it, in order to move and ventilate and be flexible, part of it's cartilaginous, which is kind of the cartilage of your ear, your nose, and so forth, the tip of your nose. It's a little bit more flexible, and that's softer and more flexible in kids. So a hit can penetrate more and squeeze the rib cage more. In adults, we have more of a fixed rib cage because we're bonier and a front and sternum and so forth. It's not completely bone. There is still some cartilage aspects of the ribs, but we have a stronger rib cage. And you can see that when players flop on each other. They're occasionally, Tony Romo and some other players have had broken ribs. I think, a lot of quarterbacks who get tackled and so forth, they get this. But it's not that much considering the kind of level and flying at each other and the weight and impact that people have in sports such as this, rugby and so forth as well. So there aren't that many rib fractures, all things considered. So the rib cage is pretty strong. And, to have this kind of penetrated problem is a very rare occurrence. So the question is, given that it was kind of an outlier, is there some underlying issue? And here's the elephant in the room. So this is from a page you can see here, and athlete collapses and deaths, 2021 to 2022. And these deaths and collapses somewhat coincide with the V word. And here is the V word. This is an article from June 2021. Israel sees a probable link between Pfizer vaccine and myocarditis cases. So it's a rare occurrence to get myocarditis from the vaccine. I want to put that out, that the vaccine is mostly safe, and it's a very good thing for the right age groups. But it is not necessarily a reasonable thing for the younger, healthier people in our society who are not going to get much problem from COVID-19 itself. And I think this was a stretch. It was a societal kind of, we're all in this together. We're at war. We all have to do this. But I don't think it was really warranted for young, healthy players, such as in the NFL, to be getting this vaccine when they are at very little risk from the consequential illness themselves. I think across all of sports, I don't know how many thousand professional athletes there are, but there are a number of thousands in the U.S. I think there were maybe a case of one athlete having problems physically from COVID-19 itself. I think there was one player on the Red Sox, it was Rodriguez, pitcher, who might have had some post-COVID myocarditis from the illness. I think there was one football player or another sport who might have had a problem, but they both recovered completely. Whereas the vaccine-related myocarditis doesn't seem to have the same level of recovery as from COVID-19 itself. I think the studies have been showing as well that COVID-19 doesn't really produce that much in the way of myocarditis, but that's still somewhat in the works. So the question is risk-benefit for any individual. Having vaccine mandates or any kind of mandate is not real medicine. Medicine is an individual pact between the physician and the patient. So there's the patient-physician relationship, and the physician has to act as advocate for the patient, not necessarily for all of society. I mean, I think you can bring it up and you can engage people and so forth, but to have people do something that doesn't really make physical sense for themselves and is not necessarily really helping anybody around them is kind of a questionable activity. And this is, I think, where the NFL might have some issues. This is going back an article that I reference quite a bit. I've had it on the show a number of times from December 2020, Decoding an Outbreak. It's a Wall Street Journal. There is a paywall. But COVID-19, ripped through the Baltimore Ravens. Well, it didn't rip them themselves. It went through. There was positive testing seen, but the players did not suffer. The Ravens went on, I believe they went on to the playoffs, maybe not, but the players were fine. There was positive tests, and there were positive testing in that COVID year. And I think there were some games might have missed or whatever, I don't know. But they wound up doing genomic testing because they have the money. It's the NFL, and there's no shortage of funds, and they have a lot of attention, a lot of kind of hangers on and extra staff, and so they were able to test every individual player and do genomic testing of their actual COVID bugs, such as they came up. And it backed the idea that the virus transmission does not come from playing football, but rather other kinds of behavior. So in this bad COVID year, 2020, the big year, players got it, but they got it from partying. They got it from going to parties and clubs and doing other extracurricular activities that people do with each other. But they didn't get on the football field. Now, on the football field, they get pretty close. They have fumble drills and they're on top of each other, but there's a big open space. They're either in a big domed stadium or a big kind of hangar of a practice field, multi-stories high, a lot of air, or they're outdoors. And so it's very interesting, even though they can get very close to each other in a football play, there was no virus transmission from playing football. So this was known in December 2020. Now, did the NFL act upon this? No, it did not. I believe that year the Super Bowl was between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Kansas City Chiefs. And Tom Brady did not disclose his vaccine status. He would not wear a mask going to the stadium. Mahomes did. Mahomes lost. Brady won. And it really didn't impinge on the play on the field. Players were fine, and they don't catch this from each other on the field. So the NFL making the players, all kind of vax up, I don't think was really useful or helpful for them. In the cases where people were, conscientious objectors, famously, the Kyrie Irving of the NFL is Cole Beasley, who had his career suffered vastly. He's pretty much been unheard of the last 2 years. And he played a little bit for Tampa Bay earlier in the year, and he just re-signed after 2 years with the Bills. They fined him $100,000 for his COVID violations. He did not have COVID violations, by the way. He just didn't get the shot. I see him as a little bit as a profile in courage because he did his own information. He's still alive. He's walking and talking. He did not get the shot. He probably had some version of COVID-19 or COVID-20 or 21 or whatever the subsequent versions are. Again, my own thesis is that Omicron is not really a congener directly from COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2. It's a coronavirus, but there have been coronaviruses forever, and it does not seem to be a lineal descendant, not a grandchild or a cousin directly of SARS-CoV-2. And it's much milder. It's on the level of the common cold. And for people getting vaccinated now against SARS-CoV-2, when Omicron is not really the same thing, is closing the barn door. The horses are left, and the horses are no longer bothering you. And moreover, SARS-CoV-2, if you want to see it as a vicious lion, which I don't think it fully was, but let's say it's a jaguar or a cougar, so Omicron is more like a house cat. I mean, it might swipe and hurt you. A house cat can bother you and maybe bite you and whatnot, but it's not like a puma, a lion, a jaguar. It's not the same bug anymore. Anyway, the Bills, in their generosity or need for receivers, they signed him. Going back to the time, this is from 2021, I'd rather die living. And this is kind of a poignant phrase in context. He rejects the COVID vaccine on Twitter, says other players agree after slamming NFL rules. And this is kind of his little take on it. He said, basically said, I made enough money and I'm going to make the choices I'm going to make. Now, I think this is interesting because Mr. Hamlin has not made enough money. He said here, he said, if you're scared of me, then steer clear, get vaccinated, point blank, period. I may die of COVID, but I'd rather die actually living. I have family members whose days are numbered. They want to come see me and stay in my house. Right? But I'm not sure where it is, but he basically says he's made enough money. He can do this. He can make this decision. Somebody like Demar Hamlin doesn't have that luxury, being a sixth round pick, a year or two in the league at this point, of kind of saying no. Because you say no, you get cut. You might get fined. At this point, you probably just get cut and they move on to somebody else. It's not worth the hassle. Cole Beasley, on some level, was worth the hassle. He was not quite a star, but he was kind of in the Wes Welker mode of a reasonable past. He was on the Cowboys for 6 years or so and the Bills for 3, and they want him back enough. And he's a good player. He's a little bit on the older side of 33 or so, whatnot, and he had the luxury of already making his coin. Mr. Hamlin has not. I'm going to go to kind of summarize, maybe end this with a BuzzFeed article, because why not? So it's actually a really good article. It's by Katie Camaro, and he may have had Commotio Cordis. I mean, I think that's pretty, nearly certain that's what he had. The question is why he had it. And she goes over some of the same data that we've been talking about, and she mentions the better survival rates in the last 15 years, probably because we have more defibrillators around. And there, she's quoting, I believe, a cardiologist, Dr. Simons, and if he was able to get resuscitated quickly enough without the brain losing much oxygen, he might have a full recovery. And that remains to be seen. I know he is still alive, so that's on the plus side. This is pretty much the same, going over the same stuff. But what I find interesting here is the phrasing. A right-wing conspiracy theory has it that a COVID vaccine caused Hamlin's arrest. I don't think anybody's saying that. I don't think this is from the COVID vaccine. There were lots of other players with vaccines on the field that didn't have cardiac arrest. The question is whether he was more susceptible to having this problem, that, again, mostly kids have, little kids, 3-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 7-year-olds, and so forth. Very, very rarely for I assume he's 22 or 3 years old, very rarely for a 20-year-old man with a fully formed rib cage to get with muscle and more, surrounding fat on the heart. And to call it a right-wing conspiracy, I mean, I think that's really prohibitive. It doesn't help kind of diagnose the problem and figure out what's going on. I think it's very important to figure this out. This is a study from Israel showing, you have to read Hebrew to get it, but basically the number of deaths from, here's FIFA, it's not in Hebrew. That's the soccer, football, international, federale, whatever. So this is the number of soccer, football. These are quasi-professional. Everybody's in FIFA is top-level players. So some of them are junior players to be in FIFA. But the number of cardiac deaths is much, much higher. Usually it's about 4 to 5 per year over this is the modern era, 2001, the last 20 years. Given the number of interactions, again, there are millions of interactions on the field and so forth. And I forget the actual number of players. I think it's 1 out of 50,000 or something like that might have a cardiac arrest during playing FIFA soccer at any given moment until now. And now the number is 5 times higher. I believe that's carried on to the following year. So those are questions that bear repeating and really deserve an answer. Whether we're going to get the answer, I don't know. I started out, I guess, with this in the last slide. Mr. Hamlin's own desires. I miss playing football. I imagine he misses it right now. If he can think on this, I certainly wish that he's able to come back and at least watch the game that he loves and move on. I don't know the answer to this question. Maybe somebody else can help me with this. Well, I'll just briefly go some of the pages I've been looking at to kind of get some of the information here. This is a Substacks by Alex Lakas. The elephant is getting harder to ignore. I'll put some links of these if you like. This was back from September. Ahim Malhotra, who's a prominent British cardiologist, recommends a pause in giving out COVID-19 shots. Here's the Israel article. This is an interesting thing about actual football physics from Popular Mechanics some time ago, and talks about how much the hits are. And frankly, there's not that much damage overall to people. Here's Cole Beasley. Let's see what else we have. So this is the BuzzFeed article. Maybe I'll just come back to my article. This is from the Daily Skeptic. Is it time to accept that Omicron is not COVID-19? So I think this is really, I wrote it. I think it's a good article. Sorry, I didn't have these up. I'll show you what they were. This is the elephant getting harder to remove. This is Israel, so forth. And here's my article. Is it time to accept that Omicron is not COVID-19? and it's very thorough. Omicron is not that closely related by mutations to the ancestral. This is the alpha, beta, delta version, so forth. Omicron is kind of further afield. If you look at the actual geneticists mapping this, they don't really see a firm connection to the strains of SARS-CoV-2. Omicron is far less dangerous. Rhinovirus has always been around. Coronavirus has always been around as a cause of common cold. This is way before any of the SARS-CoV-2 strains. And it goes on and on. But the major point that I want to make is, I'm not sure whether the NFL is doing this, but this was before they'd come out with the bivalent version, which is still out. Which is now out, and it's being recommended. People get this this vaccine, and it's really, I think, it's on very shaky ground. The shaky ground is twofold. First of all, there's been no real firm vaccine safety and efficacy trials for this version. It's bivalent. The SARS-CoV-2 portion, spike protein, is there basically to keep it under the emergency use authorization for SARS-CoV-2. And the other part, the Omicron part, is presumably the one you would need if you wanted to fight against Omicron. But we've never had a vaccine against the common cold. Omicron's on the level of the common cold. There's no point for the Omicron part to be in any vaccine. There's no vaccine against rhinovirus or adenovirus or any of those things, all the other major causes of common cold, because they're just not dangerous enough for us. They're not that bad. And to give people kind of retrials with to stress the system again with a SARS-CoV-2 vaccine, spike protein, which is the other half of the bivalent vaccine, is outdated. It's anachronistic. It's no purpose to that. SARS-CoV-2 is not circulating the world at all currently, and there's no real point. People have already accumulated immunity, natural and vaccine, to SARS-CoV-2, which again does not exist in the original form for this spike protein. It's been a couple of years now, and so there's one part that's antiquated, and the other part is essentially useless in the context of not being worth having, because you don't get that sick from it. So I have an open question, and I don't know who people can answer this, whether NFL players have had to have the bivalent vaccine in order to get on the field, and that whether if he had a more recent vaccine, that would be interesting data. Whether other players might come out and announce that, I don't know. But again, I'm not saying this is causative, but I think that in and of itself, kind of the FIFA data and other data, partially anecdotal, whatever, is interesting to follow to see what's going on. And just so you know, it's not completely anecdotal. Wikipedia has a list of athletes who have been, who have had cardiac problems, and this is going back, I guess, 100 years or so, and more. There's a number of them up until the present. They're kind of moving along. Here we are, 2006, 2007. When you hit 2021, so this is all the way up to 2014, and we probably have better data collection more recently. But once you hit 2021 and 2020, the numbers just go really. There's so many more players here, given the number per year prior. There's been some fact checking on that. Reuters kind of poo-poos it. There's some fact checks here. There's a separate Substack by Stephen Connolly and Yafa Shiraz about this sudden cardiac death. So I recommend you take a look at this, and you can see some of the data there. Anyway, so I think that might be it for me tonight. I hope you found this informative. It's trite in a way to say our thoughts and prayers are with somebody we don't know, but I sincerely wish and hope and pray that Demar Hamlin achieves consciousness, has the good fortune of seeing his family and his friends, and I certainly hope he recovers. But should he not, I hope that we are able to mourn him appropriately and learn from the circumstances. So thank you so much, and good night.